All right, last little piece. I'm going to go back biochar real quickly because I want to make sure you guys understand what it is. It's kind of an older method of doing things. Um, it is a way of producing charcoal, but not for charcoal like we think of charcoal. It's plant organic matter that is similar method to burning, but it basically captures and stores carbon dioxide underground, and then that becomes a fertilizer in the soil that can last a very long time. So this is actually, and when we say promote biochar, it's promoted over the traditional method of producing charcoal. It's not something that we would do everywhere around the world. Uh, Carbon capture and storage, that can be referred to as CCS in your textbook and potentially on a test. This is about catching that stuff from the power plant and literally injecting it down under the ground and sealing it off indefinitely forever. Obviously, the fear is that that stuff gets out, it leaks, something like that. Geoengineering, I cut down quite a bit, but this is where we talked about Mount Pinatubo erupting, putting these things in the air that saw the Philippines have cooler temperatures. Well, the idea is to send these up in a rocket, a balloon, a jet, whatever the case might be, dump them up there and allow them to catch incoming solar radiation, reflect it back out before it ever gets to Earth. Seeding the oceans with iron. This is basically a fertilization technique for phytoplankton. It's going to stimulate photosynthesis essentially and allow these species to take in more of that carbon dioxide to obviously alleviate some of the stress. And these are temporary solutions. These are not things that we would want to do a long time, nor are they things that are even really high on the priority list to do at all. This is some of the pictures in your notes, or in your book. Sorry, but you have different methods of doing this iron fertilization. Carbon dioxide. This is classified as a greenhouse gas. The EPA is in 2009 finally classified it as a dangerous gas, potentially dangerous to public health. And it wasn't just this one; it was methane, nitrous oxide. Fossil fuels are balking against any of these kind of things because typically those things mean there's going to be regulations, there's going to be taxes, there's going to be monitoring, and for these companies, that means more cost to them. Putting a price on carbon emissions, there's a couple. There's subsidies, and then there's just taxing. Straight taxing, we don't really do this too much, but it's basically the more carbon you produce, the higher taxes you pay. California and a lot of other places, they do the cap and trade. Everybody gets tokens. We talked about this last chapter. Everybody gets tokens. If you use all your tokens, but you don't use any more, you're good. If you use over your number of tokens, then you pay fines. However, if other companies don't use all their tokens, they can sell them to you, trade them to you, whatever you want to call it. So the downside of this is a lot of people don't feel this discourages waste. The companies that waste produce the most typically are the most lucrative, so they can afford to just buy more cap from other countries. And then it never really discourages things. Subsidies, we talked about, work both ways. You can subsidize to keep costs down for the consumer, which is typically what we do. So we subsidize things like agriculture, commercial fishing, the fossil fuel industry, or you can subsidize to encourage better behavior, so to speak, more environmentally friendly behavior to encourage energy efficient technologies or the use of. So we would obviously prefer these to subsidies that would encourage the use or continued use of coal and oil. Kyoto Protocol is a big piece of legislation, that international piece of legislation that looks at greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane. U.S. did not and still has not ratified this. Went into effect in 2005. I read recently they extended it to 2020. I don't know what the date was prior to that, but I want to say in 2012 they ended up extending it, and it might have been a 10-year deal to 2015, and then they ended up extending it to 2020. But anyways, this is one way that countries can come together, talk about things, discuss, and work towards fixing technology transfer, richer countries helping out the poorer countries. And that's one thing that needs to happen. And then protection of large forests. This because a lot of these are in the less developed nations and they don't necessarily have the means to protect them. And these are actually valuable to them. They're valuable economically to the point where sometimes they let destruction happen. Places where things are good: Costa Rica, goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. These two countries maybe produce the most pollution now, exempt from the Kyoto Protocol. One of the reasons the United States didn't necessarily agree with it. But they need to make a change as well. And I think both of these countries are pursuing technology to do that. It's just going to take some time. U.S. cities, states taking initiatives. California has some of the most strict emissions, fuel efficiency standards, cap and trade programs in all of the country. They have a goal of getting 33% of the energy for Californians from renewable sources by 2030. So, they've set some pretty lofty goals. Portland, Oregon, and a lot of places in the Pacific Northwest are pretty environmentally conscious. Companies doing well. Carbon footprint. So I do ask you about this. Carbon footprint is about the lifestyle you choose, your daily food, clothes, whatever it is, taking into account all the carbon that's necessary to produce that particular product. United States, we have the largest carbon footprint of any per capita per person of any country in the world. This list I gave you, just simple things you can do to be more efficient in your lives. And last piece, how can we adapt to climate change? Realize that we can change things. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to fixing this whole greenhouse gas emissions deal. Whether or not we believe in climate change, whether or not it proves to be true, economically, ecologically, health-wise, we're going to benefit from just cleaning up the way we're doing things and being more efficient. How do we prepare? Some of these are extreme. Some of these are pretty straightforward and things we should and are doing. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible. Move people from low-lying coastal areas. Take measures against storm surges at the coast. Prepare for more intense wildfires. Conserve water. Theory is that a lot of places that are already having a challenge with water, it may become more challenging. And then last one, a no regret strategy. What if the climate models are wrong and there is no serious threat of climate change? So the no regrets idea is any actions against climate disruption will lead to important benefits in a whole lot of other ways. So if climate change, global warming in particular, is not as extreme as some people make it out to be, then we're still going to be doing a huge benefit to our world and our ecosystems by actually taking some of these actions to reduce pollution and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we are finished.